Good morning. Welcome back to the ALG Show. That's too loud. I'm gonna stop doing the applause. Oh man. Today we're gonna be talking with Bryan Vaca, director, actor, and creator. We get into a range of stuff, including his previous experience at USC's film school, as well as taking risks in the film industry and his sort of experience with low budget indie filmmaking. Without any further ado, let's get into it.
It's been that's like my best answer. Like it fluctuates. It's definitely one of those interesting times in the industry. Um, and I guess what I've been doing is working on my own stuff. I would say I really wanted to build up my portfolio because I think that would help me get more jobs, but also help define who I am as like a filmmaker. So that's kind of been my main priority right now, just focusing on the portfolio pieces and making my own work, short films, music videos, commercials where I can, and building myself out. I think I'm kind of in, I don't know if you can call it a rebrand, but like kind of like a little bit of a reset. Reset.
Interesting.
Yeah, like not to say I'm gonna go totally 180 on what I've been doing before, but it's like kind of going to the next level of like my potential and what I can do, and really putting myself out there even more. Um, yeah.
So I guess you could call it like a for the sake of the conversation, let's just call it like a refresh, a re up. Um, how does it compare to like the stuff that you were doing before? Is it like a complete 180? Is it just like a slight shift from what you were doing before? What is kind of the main uh, consensus from what you learned before going into the stuff that you're getting into now?
Uh, yeah, that I don't view it as a 180 change. I think it's like a building on top of each other
Mm-hmm.
type of thing. Like, I feel like I've gone through like kind of distinct eras in my kind of filmmaking, video making career. Originally, I started with being like in the influencer space, making short form content for like brands and things like that. And I wasn't necessarily like entirely fulfilled by it. I was kind of in the sense that I was ignoring my creative potential, and I wasn't doing the things that I was like really passionate about. Of course, I was doing things to like kind of at the time. Mostly when I was doing that, I was in college. I was like in the later years of college, so it was like pay like it was used to pay rent. It was used to pay some expenses I needed, but I wasn't building out my portfolio in the sense of like, okay, yeah, I do this commercial stuff, influencer stuff, and that's what brings in the bills. But I'm not building my portfolio enough to actually show like things that I'm interested in, the things that I'm influenced by, like film and TV and any other social media content I view. And I build upon that, and then started getting into like my own making my own stuff on TikTok, making my own videos that I liked. I originally started with like horror, things like that, and kind of spooky stuff, and like kind of drama. And then eventually, like I did things that were inspired by like the Wednesday show when that came out. I did a little horror movie that I put on TikTok and Instagram. I would do like I would get on some trends and basically take that. Like I had a ghost. There was a ghost face trend going around TikTok, so I put my own spin on that and add a little bit of a story. And I guess that kind of went into like the end of that second phase. At the end of that, I made a Barbie short film. It was a comedy film. I have never really done comedy. I didn't think I was good at comedy, but I wanted to try something different and really make my first short film that had a legitimate like crew size. It had a big ensemble cast. I think like in the end, it was probably around 15 people involved with that.
Right.
Uh, in in total, like in overall the experience, um, 15 to 20 people, and that really kind of began, kind of, I guess you could say, maybe this third phase I'm in, which is I'm influenced by so many things. Like you could say Euphoria. I really like Euphoria. I like Babylon, Damien Chazelle. I also like things that I just view on Instagram. My explore page on Instagram is just so aesthetic, and it's like that because I'll see digital creators and people that just make stuff like solely online make really cool short videos. Um, and when I was in college, like I never really saw those creators. I saw more of like the influencer crowd, and so I didn't realize the full potential of like how someone could utilize TikTok and Instagram and social media. And so I thought, okay, let me let me start making my own stuff. So there's a lot of creators out there. It's like hard to like name them. I think like to just maybe name a few. There's this one creator named like Monique Yvonne. There's another creator named Infinite Elliot, and amongst others. But essentially, these people were using social media to kind of bring their own creative potential to life, like basically making short films that would be short enough to be bingeable, but have enough narrative to be to be engaging the whole way through. And I that inspired me to kind of like, okay, let me emulate that. Let me be inspired. Let me do my own take on it and put that put that out there. So right now, I guess you could say, yeah, I'm in my third phase, and what it's starting with is I'm working on this angel project. I mean, because you're the DP
I
on
do
it,
know
but
about it. Yeah.
yeah, you know a little bit,
A little bit.
but yeah, and essentially that's, I guess, my first foray in utilizing my inspirations that I've been interested in. I've been getting into like fashion film, and I've been wanting to do more with narrative. I've been wanting to play around with like story and aesthetics, and really with the Angel project, I've had that idea since you could say 2019. And on my Instagram, the very first post is a variation of it, but the idea has evolved over the years, but it's been with me since like 2020. The very first post is at a class in USC. It was like kind of a sitcom class. I wasn't really interested in sitcoms, but it was one of the classes where you could really make films. And I utilized it to make this angel project about a guy who is not necessarily making all the best choices in college, and that this his guardian angel visits him to kind of course correct his life and give him pointers and give him advice and be there for him. And with his angel project, it's a little different. It's definitely a lot more imaginative than that early version was,
Mm.
but the essence of it is the same. It's this guardian angel visiting this guy, like this an angel project, this artist, because he is feeling very fulfilled by his art, but also lonely in his life, and that he doesn't have other people to, or anyone else really, to pour his art into, or to like share his art with.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so he pours that imaginative spirit into this art, and then essentially that art ends up coming to life. And so the narrative comes from that. So why that project is special to me is I've had a lot of ideas. I've honestly had an entire world swirling around in my head for a while, and I've been playing around with smaller ideas, kind of getting practice in. And this angel project is really the first time I'm able to expand on that world, really bring that world onto the screen, to bring my interest forward. With that angel project, I'm really excited because I'm able to bring people with different disciplines into the fold, not just from film, but also people with expertise and backgrounds in fashion, and to kind of play around with like disciplines. I think that's what I've always wanted to do. Is even though I'm a film director, and that's like I what I lead forward with. I had interest in fashion. I've had interest in music, amongst other things. And my goal was to always see how you can blend them together and what you could create from that. And I think this Angel Project is the first time I'm doing that. And so I'm excited about how that project comes out and what other projects may lead from that project. So, yeah, that's how it works.
For the record, I have seen your Instagram. It is so like you just your explore page. It is so deeply well curated. I like
Yeah.
envy the level of curation that's gone in. Just for the record, like it's insane. And so this, I wanted to ask you, this initial Angel film, My Angel Perry, is this something that you did because you mentioned going to USC? Is this like a thesis project that you did for them? Is this just a personal exercise you decided to do? What led to the creation of this specific Angel film?
It was in that class we made two films. We were supposed to make two films because during the duration of that class, I took it in the spring of 2020.
Mm-hmm.
So like I said, we had to make two Angel projects, or well, two film projects. And the first one ended up being the Angel project I made. The second one is when COVID happened, so we never actually got to make them. And so this was right. So I made that right before COVID hit.
So this wasn't a thesis film. This was just part of your
Yeah,
curriculum.
the curriculum of the class for that. I Even though it was a sitcom class, I wanted to do something a little different. It was one of the few classes that I saw that had access to cameras and to already built stages. So everything was set for you. You just had to write the narrative and find actors and go with it.
So this, you said this was a part of a sitcom class?
Yeah, it was framed as like a sitcom class in terms, well, I say sitcom, but in terms of the actual class, it was a multi-camera. It was a multi working with multiple cameras at once,
Mm-hmm.
and that usually means sitcom because sitcom is usually in front of a live audience. This wasn't, but you're working with different cameras all on at once, and kind of directing in terms like in a way that's similar to like live television, where you're flipping between cameras
Oh, I see. Yeah.
in real time. And yeah, like I said, it was one of the few classes. I was part of the business and film school, and the film school, I was a I was a film minor, but the way they framed it is that you got more exposure. Like it wasn't just like, oh, you just take some classes here and there. It was like you get access to as much curriculum as you can in the film school.
Mm-hmm.
So like I was actually doing a double major. However, the thing was there were some classes that were only reserved for film production majors. There were so few of them compared to the other majors in the school and the other the other students with academic minors. So it was like those best classes were only reserved for those kind of film production majors. So they were very impacted classes. I would have liked to have been in them, but the only way you could have been in them is if you worked on thesis films, if you knew somebody in the class whenever they needed help. But they were very exclusive. And so my best bet was to get into any classes where I could have access to equipment and be able to make my own projects, as much as I could in those classes. So this ended up being one of them, and it's where I tested out this angel idea, the this initial concept of it, and yeah, just went from there.
It's interesting because I feel like everybody that I know who has like gone to film school and like properly gone through like their bachelor's to get it have all had varying experiences. Obviously, I'm like what is it like outside looking in. I've actually done a few thesis projects like for a couple film school students, so I've seen um what that workflow entails. And it's definitely interesting. How do you feel about, like, since you obviously your perspective of it is like you kind of minored in it, you double majored, you double dipped with this in business. What do you feel like is like the main thing that you sort of gained from having gone through not only film school but film school at USC in particular?
Connections. That's really what it boils down to.
Mm-hmm.
With you is USC runs this industry. I would say, yeah. There's a joke going around that that goes around that there's a USC like mafia type of thing. Like, and it's just
Interesting.
that when someone like when I would meet someone, I don't know anything about them, and they don't know anything about me, and I just drop, oh yeah, no, I went to USC, and they're like, I went to USC. Suddenly, the conversation, the dynamic changes because you have that shared experience, and so they're more willing to help you. And from what I've seen, there's a lot of USC grads working all across the industry at like varying levels, from like recent grads to like to top directors, producers, actors, agents, managers, to executives, people running these
A
companies.
lot of people.
Yeah, they're all spread out.
Right.
And when I initially transferred to USC, and the reason I wanted to do that and why I also applied to be in the film school is because I knew having that on my resume and being, well, even before having that on my resume, being in that community would be would pay dividends for the rest of my life, as for like the rest that I pursued this and was a part of this industry. I've met a lot of great people that have gone to do incredible things, from just the people that I met during my time at USC. A lot of people that have gone on to that are creating really cool careers for themselves in varying fields of cinema and filmmaking and narrative, and I guess you could say like anything cinematic, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I kind of noticed that we were kind of talking a little bit before about this particular guy that you met who was in the DGA, and like you guys hit it off kind of right away because you had mentioned having gone to USC. So I think it's pretty interesting how like having that shared experience has not only led you to certain opportunities, but also like will continue to lead you into certain opportunities. I think that's really cool. Talking about things that are in common, that was like kind of the main reason we clicked, was because we're both Mexican. Um,
Yeah.
how do you
Yeah.
feel about like being Mexican in the film industry? How has that shifted your perspective going into projects? What has that been like for you?
It's really interesting because I remember when I first told my parents I wanted to get into this, they doubted me a little bit, but it wasn't necessarily doubt coming from my side of it, in terms of like, we don't doubt that you can do it. We doubt that the industry will let you do it.
Mm,
Um, there's not a lot of people that look like us in the industry, is what my parents said. They were hesitant to let me pursue that. Even kind of going back to USC, when I was in these business, entrepreneurship, entertainment classes, these film classes at the film school, there was not a lot of Latinos. I mean, there were a couple, but
mm,
there's any Latinos as you would find in the classes that were like the social sciences and the humanities, basically like stuff that would end up leading people to go towards med school, law school. Like, that's where all the Latinos were, mostly that I saw, where they were in the fields that were more promising in terms of stability and being well off after pursuing them.
yeah.
And I felt a little alone, but like I didn't want to stop. I just continued doing it. And the thing is, I'm trying to figure out my place in it as well, because even I'm Mexican, there's this thing is, obviously, you want to tell stories based on your authentic experience. And usually when people, think of like having an authentic experience, they go to their backgrounds and their stories. And when I see like other Latinos and they tell stories, obviously they're telling underrepresented stories. But you know, I've been very fortunate to have lived the life that I have lived. Thank you to my parents. Meaning, I basically lived in the suburbs my entire life. I went to like private school up until college.
Mm-hmm.
I I went to a great public college. I graduated from a great private university. Um, and but it's just my experience is different as being a Latino, especially being Mexican. It's like we're trying to find a place where I didn't necessarily. I attended school in South Central, but I didn't grow up in South Central or in an area like that.
Mm-hmm.
I Even though I struggled in my own life, it was definitely a very different struggle. And I I did live with some privilege, so it definitely affected the way I told stories. I think, thinking about it, because I can't tell a story about a Latino in the project. I feel like it's not my experience.
Mm.
Um, and like I'm a guy from the valley. Like, I'm a kid from the valley, dude. Like the
Right.
valley suburbs. So I've been finding my way, and a lot of my friends in industry that are pursuing this, I don't know too many Latinos. Like, everybody is something else. And so, but it doesn't discourage me. I would say it only like pushes me, motivates me. And when we met, I was like, oh, that's crazy. Like, I was like, yo, I remember you told me that you were on a film job one time and they put the like a Mexican flag patch on the camera,
Yeah.
and you're like, yeah, you're like
Yeah. Yeah.
really.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's what it's about. Like, and I think it's also like I was kind of touching on before, it's a cultural thing, like
Yeah.
our companies like don't really see this as the most stable path forward, and it is a gamble. There's a lot of risk taking, but I think anything in life is a risk. I think even trying to be stable is a risk. I don't really believe stability exists in the first place, to be honest. Um, and like if life is a risk, you might as well take a risk on what you really want to do and see if it's going to pan out, because you don't really know. What if it does?
Yeah.
So when we met, I was like, you know what? Like, I love that had a similar background. Um, he also had similar experience. Like, I know, like being in the valley, like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, we really connected. And so, yeah, I'm glad that we met. I'm glad that we got to talk at like that networking event. That now that like we're working on projects together, so that's exciting.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's definitely like I wouldn't dismiss like your lived experience, like having been in the valley, because like valley isn't a bad spot, and but I think the main point that I want to get across is like culturally there's still a lot shared. Like there is that struggle of like having to prove that like this is a career that's worth pursuing. And I'm sure like we've all been disciplined the same way. Right? Like there's a lot of similarities regardless of the way that you choose to articulate it. There's always going to be some sentiment that's carried across, at least for our types of stories, right? And yeah, even like in certain industries, I think I read somewhere that like I think of the people who like graduate college, it's like maybe 10% are Latino, maybe less, like between 8 and 10%.
yeah,
So for you to not only do like film school, which is like you're one of maybe a couple hundred kids from that class. I don't know how big the graduations are, but not only that, you also did. double major, you double dipped in business as well, and I imagine like you were also kind of the lone Mexican there. But yeah,
So definitely.
yeah, and like I hold on to every one of us every time I meet somebody new. Like I met my now camera assistant Jonathan Chan. He's also been on the podcast. I met him like what was it like maybe April of last year, and I've hired
Yeah.
him ever since. It's like mi gente, we gotta like stick with each other. Like
Yeah.
we gotta look out for each other because there's only so many of us, and I think it's important that we share our perspective and our stories, and whether it's through a different medium like horror or something like that Guillermo del Toro does, or some very specific cultural thing like Guaron. Like it could be one or the other, but in any case, we're gonna say our story, and it comes across, and we have to look out for each other.
No, exactly.
Yeah. So you didn't meet anybody else in the program that was Mexican, or you were like
I mean,
pretty.
there was a couple of people that I met that were Latinos. I remember during like my time there is when started a the they called it the Latinx Film and Media Association, I think.
Hmm.
And so that started, and that's where there was more of the Latinos were in there. But I would say they were all like mostly scattered, to be honest. But I did meet a couple. I will say also a funny story when I was at USC was I remember there was this visiting director, Mexican director, and he was showing his showing his film that was on Netflix. I forget the name. There's this Mexican singer, and in the story, this Mexican singer dies, and his soul ends up getting transferred to the body of one of his impersonators. So then the impersonator who was going to die wakes up with the soul of this Mexican singer, this iconic Mexican singer. I really wish I could remember his name, but that was essentially the story of the film, and it's like the chaos that ensues from that, and how he tries to correct the guy, this impersonator's guy's life, and I remember it starred Omar Chaparro. I got to meet him actually at that screening, and the point of the story is I went up to the Mexican director. He was an alum from the film school. I was like, he got his MFA there at USC, and I asked him, "Hey, like, am I pursuing the wrong thing?" Like straight up, because I was like solely business at that point. It was
Mm-hmm.
very early during my time at USC. I was like, "Am I wasting my time with business? Should I just drop it, just go straight to film?" And he's the one who told me that I should carry those business skills with me because they will end up being very much invaluable. And I was just very moved by him giving me advice, and like that in the midst of all these people kind of surrounding him, he was like directly talking to me only and giving me advice on like how to pursue this, how to maintain, why it's not a waste of time, why those skills are invaluable to like the grand scheme of things. And I felt even more moved because of what we're talking about. It's like he's a Mexican director, he's a working director in the industry, and like very few people like that came to visit. And so I was just soaking up every word.
Right.
Yeah. So it's like, yeah, the culture is strong,
Yeah, the
and
culture's strong, definitely.
wherever we can.
Yeah, definitely. And it was cool that like he gave you the space to like talk and vent about this super particular issue, and the fact that he was like don't drop the business stuff, like that's definitely super useful. Um I have a friend also who did like a double major like that. He didn't go to like USC or anything. He went to CSUN.
Mm.
And again, mi gente, like we're in the valley, we gotta stick with each other. He double dipped. He majored in film production, but he minored. I don't know if he minored if it was like a double major, but it was in marketing.
Yeah.
he kind of went into that sort of thinking the same thing of like, this is an invaluable skill set. I'm always gonna um, have some sort of job regardless of if filmmaking works out or not. And luckily, it has panned out for him. But um, I think it was a smart move for you to do like business as well. Talking about that, I guess existential thought that you had. How do you kind of navigate like your own mental health in this industry? Because there's a lot of inconsistency. We talked about it just not being that stable. It's very fickle. Um, how do you keep a positive mindset? How do you keep yourself mentally in check? Whether it's
Right.
between projects or like having doubts about your own work. What do you do?
I mean, I will say I'm in therapy, and that helps me to kind of go through that and kind of address my experience and what I'm going through with my therapist and go through that. On the other end, I like to think about it sometimes in the grand scheme of things. Well, in two ways. One of them is the grand scheme of things of like we only have this one life. And I believe that people usually think they have time. And the answer is you do and you don't, because your time could be up at any time. And if you spent your time pursuing things that were safe, meanwhile having these passions that that you don't really capitalize on or you never pursue, that can end up being a problem, because I think at the end of life, you never think about all the money that you made. You never think about all the things that come from having followed like only a safe path and ignoring maybe your passions or things that you might have wanted to do. You think about your passions. You think about, did I do enough? Did I do the things that I wanted to do? I would read like stories of people on their deathbeds. I know this is so morbid, but like it's just, and the regrets they have. And it kind of opened my eyes to like, yeah, this is scary. This is hard and this is a gamble. And in the day to day, it's it's scary. Like it's, you don't know where your next paycheck is coming from. At times, you try to work a part-time job or a full-time job, but depending on what you do, it may not be as feasible, because when that opportunity comes in from wherever the next set is, you can't really have a 9 to 5. So it's like even if you wanted to, because of the nature of the work, you can't. But I think, at the end of the day, you get to do this. Like how many people can say that?
Not a lot.
Like exactly. Like you're chasing your passions, and that's what I like to really think about. And also like not just chasing your passion, chasing what you're good at, chasing like the things that set your heart on fire, and or doing things that will help you fund that or help you in any way to get to the next level, like in that field. The other way I like to think about it, more of a micro, so going from that macro perspective to the micro. Me personally, I've always been a person that just loves adventure. I think since I was a kid, I love the adventure. I guess you could say I kind of love the chaos of life, but in a good way. I love the nuance. I love doing new things. I love meeting new people, doing new things. I kind of have a routine, but I do enjoy more the spontaneity. And with filmmaking, it was one of those things where, yes, it is a job, but the job is always so different
Mm-hmm.
every time. Like, there's always something new to it, there's always new people to meet. It's just the nature of it appealed to me, not just the creative of having my imagination flow, but it's just the nature of the work appeals a lot to me. And so with my mental health, it was something where, like, yes, it is scary. Sometimes I do think about, did I choose the right thing? Am I, being an artist is hard. I think being an artist is not for the weak. People like to think maybe that it's easy. It is one of the hardest jobs, things you could do in life, because you really, I saw someone talk about this one time, but you're betting on your soul being an artist, because that is all you can think about. Nothing is certain. It sometimes does come from luck, being in the right place at the right time. So what can you bet? The only certainty variable and all that? It's you. It's, are you are you in your own corner? Are you believing in yourself? Because there are countless stories of people that have made it, but went years through doubt and through having not the best time, through not making a lot of money for years, and then blew up. Of course, there is the opposite of that, of people that had moderate success or never blew up. But it's, I guess, to me, it all comes down to, well, why do you do it? And it's that if there's anything I've ever wanted to do in life, it was this. Despite all the pros and cons of it, all its own personal challenges and difficulties, I would think I find it successful for myself if this is what I got to do in my life. And so I usually use those, like, that macro micro perspective to really help me kind of put everything in check, of kind of grounding myself essentially. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, the challenges are valid, the doubt is valid, being scared is valid, but the doubt, I think, for me, the chasing this and embracing the doubt, I'm gonna do that every time over paying the price of, like, regret,
Yeah.
like, side of it. Like, I don't want to live with that regret of never having done it, because that is gonna suck way more than any doubt, any fear that you might experience from chasing it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think um I'm also kind of in a similar boat of like there is definitely um certain moments, especially like when work is super slow, where I'm like, oh, like is this a career that is for me at certain times? Then there's definitely that moment of like doubt for sure of like, is this the right thing? Or like, I am taking a complete gamble. It's not like I have the same fallback of like, oh, I have majored in something else. I have no plan B. This has to work.
Yeah,
So I have to make this happen one way or another. I gotta pay bills. I got that I gotta take care of. Like that's gonna come either way, and either I gotta come up with that dollar amount some way somehow. And I think also like something that definitely has contributed to doubt. Um, I'm sure you've had you mentioned it earlier about like your parents are like, hey yo, like is this something that's stable? Is this something that's worth pursuing? Which is like, it's
yeah,
not meant to be condescending or like put you down in any way. It's just like they just want to make sure you're good.
right. No, exactly. And I feel like it comes from, especially in the Latino community, a comparison game, because when you have cousins or friends or any other family friends, anybody you might know that pursue more stable paths,
Mm.
maybe perhaps making more money, it's easy to compare. But honestly, in my perspective, what I've seen, there is no such thing as stability. Stability is something that people like to think that they have, because people want control over their lives. People naturally don't like having no control over things. They always want to know what they can control. The reality is, life happens.
Yeah.
Very micro to, like, it only affects you, to the macro where, like, you get things like recessions, pandemics, strikes across all industries, like stability doesn't exist. There is things where even also just market and demand. There are just so many things like supply and demand that affect everything. So it's like people like to say like, "Oh, it's not stable," and I'm like, "Well, nothing is." If you really think about it, nothing is. Yeah, you make you can make a lot of money, but it's like, are they sustainable? Like jobs? I don't know. Like I could really go into a bunch of other details and examples, but that's essentially like the conclusion I've come to is things are great one day and maybe not so great the next. It's just life, and you can pursue the things that are stable, but will sorry, you can pursue things that are stable today, but will they be stable tomorrow? Because technology changes, life changes, society changes, jobs have come and gone. And I guess what I'm going back to is if everything's changing and the variables are evolving all the time, you might as well pursue the thing that what you are drawn to and that are good at, that you have the skills for, that honestly sets your heart on fire, that really pushes you, that really motivates you, that kind of gets you up in the morning. Because I think at the end of the day, like that's the thing that well really is gonna make life worth it.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there still like I don't know if you feel this way. Is there still a level of like having to prove to your parents that like, hey, this is a career that's like for me? Because I feel like for a long time that was the case. I earned my validity card when I did a music video for Los Tucanes de Tijuana, and that
Yeah.
was like, all right, yeah, this is like you're making money and like this is cool, and now we're super supportive of you. Um, is there still that kind of effort to try and prove yourself, or are they like, all right, he's off to the races, he's going, we don't need to like worry about him in a sense?
Yeah, so I still experience doubt from my parents all the time. My parents are definitely they immigrated to this country. They are definitely used to the idea of you work 5, 6 days a week maybe from the morning to the evening, and you do that every week, and you call that your life in terms of making a living, and that's how you sustain yourself. And anything outside of that kind of paradigm is seen as unconventional, untraditional, and not necessarily the most stable, and very susceptible to doubt if it's going to work. I always get the doubt. I think even from way in the beginning. So, like I said earlier, I transferred to USC. The idea to transfer to USC was definitely just mine,
Mm-hmm.
and the reason I wanted to do USC was because for the long time, for the longest time, I didn't know what I wanted to do, like in terms of like what job title in the end would that be. I honestly wanted to explore my creativity, but I never knew the kind of industries or jobs that worked with creativity. And I started exploring just a lot of things. So I basically started with things that I didn't like and just narrowed it down. And I ended up coming to like this fields of like the humanities, of like literature, the arts, getting into business and the side of entrepreneurship and marketing. And I was like, well, okay, I have all these things that are a little different, but they actually could all coexist together. And what I landed with was, well, I could actually do this with like entertainment. And so I thought, to give myself a fighting chance of really succeeding in this field, like I want to go back to LA. I was going to school in San Diego, so there was also that thing. But I told my parents, I want to come back to LA and I want to go to USC. And the question that comes up is, okay, cool. What's USC and how much does it cost? And obviously, the answer was
A lot.
didn't like. Yeah, the answer they didn't like that answer. They didn't like it. Sure.
Yeah.
Work. I did the work and I got in thankfully, and I got in on a full ride. So I
Oh
told that
wow.
yeah, I told that to my parents. I'm gonna figure this out so you won't have to pay anything, because it was the reality of the situation. My parents could help me, but the costs were so enormous that I knew I was going to need help. I knew I was gonna have to find a way. So I did it for myself. And when I showed them, I was like, I did this. Like I'm doing like and the thing is, even though I did that, there is still doubt. there is still there is still doubt because of they're like, you're doing so much for this. Like there's so many risks, there's so many gambles, there's so many moving parts all the time. How do you know anything's ever going to pan out? And I'm like, I don't know. And honestly, that's kind of the beauty of it. Like that's why I kind of like it. It's like, yeah, it's scary and it's uncertain, but it's also kind of the thrill of the chase, the thrill of if you keep working at it, you never know. Because I've gotten into plenty of opportunities that I've been preparing with no deadline, preparing with no destination, and it one day an opportunity comes and you're like, this is what I've been preparing for. It happens. Um, and I hope my parents, uh, you know, doubt me less, but I understand that they do. And I think at the end of the day, I just kind of learn to, even regardless of the doubt, to keep pushing. Like, I hope
Mhm.
it's not, but if it's there forever, it's there forever. Um, but I'm still gonna keep doing me basically and trying to figure out how to make this work, because this is ultimately my life. Um, it's and I don't say that to be dismissive of like what they have done for me, obviously, but that this is a gamble I've decided to take, and in the end, when I reflect about it all, the question would be like, did I get to do the things that I wanted to do? Did I leave it all on the table?
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think even still, like, even though I've like proven that like, hey, this is a career and like I actually get paid for this sort of thing, I think there's still definitely moments where I'm like, hey, like, are you still getting paid for that sort of thing? Like, are you good? And I'm like, listen, I'm okay. I would, you know, you would know if things were not good. Actually, no,
Yeah,
they wouldn't. I'd try to prove that like this is a stable career and stuff. But um, yeah, I think it just comes down to them like just wanting to make sure you're good, and like every parent hopes that like their kid doesn't like fall off the cliff, sort of thing.
yeah,
Yeah. So on a much lighter note, after USC, after you've gone and done this double major, um, that led into this Barbie film, I believe. Um, what
yeah.
what was the conception of that? What was your reasoning behind it? And tell me a little bit about that, because this came out like after Barbenheimer. It looks like in September.
The conception. So it came out in September. The shooting of it took place in July. Actually, the first shoot day was the day the Barbie movie came out. I remember that. The first
Mm-hmm.
shoot day. I had written the script beforehand, and the the conception of it is that I originally wanted to do a Barbenheimer story. There's just a lot of factors at play. Part of it was I wanted to do a Barbenheimer story, and I originally was gonna do it as like a TikTok series and kind of make it. It seemed like it was gonna be a comedy, and it was gonna be a little bit of a parody, and it was gonna be Barbie meeting Oppenheimer, and the story would be that they would be next door neighbors and doing that. However, like two things are happening at the same time as this process is going. One of them is the SAG strikes, and how SAG came out saying something that if you made anything digitally that would be like directly or indirectly promoting these films, they would like that would kind of be there might be some penalties to pay for that essentially. Like you may not be able to join the union because you were crossing the picket fence.
Right.
Um, and on the other side of it is I'm thinking about like I've been doing TikTok things, I've been doing Instagram things. I had done a couple of short films, but I never done like a proper short film. I've always done like skeleton crews. I had like from like either just me or just me and someone else. I had never really done like a proper crew where every role is filled on set. There is an ensemble cast. It's more than just me acting sometimes, or I do have actors, but like I've never dealt with like an ensemble cast that I had that I had for that. Um, and so I was like, you know what, I'm gonna do it. I just went for it. I had so many doubts because I didn't have the proper equipment. I didn't have things that I really thought that I would need, and so I just said, you know what, I'm just gonna go for it. I shot on an iPhone 14 Pro Max. For the sound, I had this mic that you can put at the end of your phone, and so I just used that to be basically the boom. I used available lighting, and I made this. And I did the necessary SAG paperwork so that everybody would feel safe making this film because there was so many things going on with the strike. Some of it was confusing, some of it was clear, and people essentially sometimes didn't know what that meant when it came to making projects. So I did what I could do, and I did my best. And like I said, I'd done a couple of things, mostly horror up until that, and so I thought, okay, I'm gonna do comedy. And the reason it ended up like as you see, there is no Oppenheimer in that film because with the strikes, as I said, I thought Oppenheimer right now is popular because the movie is coming out. Like it was based on a book, sure, and the book has been out there, but Oppenheimer is a topical thing right now because of this film. Barbie, on the other hand, has always been a topical thing because it's a brand.
Yeah.
Like it's so I thought I could get away with more going solely on Barbie, changing the story so that it's not reflective of dolls. Like these are real people playing these personalities, and just going from there and making the story being one of a mental health angle of being yourself and what that means. And I thought the best way to push that message forward of being yourself and the kind of the cost of being authentic and the benefits of being authentic was through this seemingly perfect character in Barbie. Um, the tagline for the film ended up being like, she can be anything but herself.
Mm.
And I decided to go that mental health was that it's been a part of my experience. I have dealt with anxiety. I've dealt with what it means to hide behind a mask and to not be fully yourself in front of people, being worried about how you might be judged or how you might come off of to other people. And yeah, I wanted to do that. And obviously, that the Barbie movie was based on the experience of being a woman. That is not my experience, so that's why I also went with the mental health because that is my experience. And I just went from there, and it was a really exciting film from the behind the scenes to what ended up being on screen. It was a different. I was branching out from what I usually had done. I never thought I would make a movie about Barbie,
Right.
but it was something that was a new exercise, a new kind of step into this different world that I'm used to, and I think that's what I love. I love exploring things that I'm not usually thinking about. And with this, that was why also the project was exciting, to explore something different than what I normally had made or had thought to make.
Yeah, the mental health. I have since watched this, and it's a really fun film, and it definitely the mental health angle definitely does um, come across for sure. So you mentioned having to put together some SAG paperwork. What was that like? It was like, yeah. What was it? I have no idea.
It was basically, I was doing my research. You know, it really came from like as the strikes were happening, some of the actors were nervous about filming this because nobody on the at the time nobody on the set was SAG, but they didn't want their their chances of joining the union to uh, be affected by making this film, especially like, yes, it is a Barbie film and it is coming around the same time as the bigger Barbie film by Greta, and they were like, would it be directly promoting it, indirectly promoting it? And so I thought the best way, so to not make this recklessly and to be considerate, was to do the SAG paperwork of doing a micro budget agreement, I think is what it was. And it basically gave protections to people in that, like, SAG was aware that this film was being made and that the people on it were not going to be affected, and that they could have this paperwork for whenever the day comes that they join the union, that they would be okay essentially.
Like it's sort of it's almost like a waiver that sort of allowed them to take the
Yeah,
production. Yeah.
yeah. So essentially, like a waiver to take the production to make sure that they would be solid in making this. And yeah, I the last thing I wanted to do was make a film, a passion project that would affect somebody professionally in a negative way. If I really couldn't find any way around it, I just would have not made the film, or I would have waited until after the strike. And however, I did find that way to make it, and I I did, and I got that paperwork done. I notified the cast, and we we were able to move forward with making it.
What besides like the talent? What was sort of your crew list for this? Because you mentioned having shot this on an iPhone. Was there a massive crew on this? Was it just like very skeleton? What was the workflow?
But kind of skeleton, but it was like more filled out in that I had it was my friends helping me out, and I did have a DP. I did have one person for sound. I did have a script supervisor. I had I had a producer. I had casting casting directors. I'm trying to think. Like, I honestly had it all. Those some people, I think it was like 6 people in total for crew. Some people did have multiple hats, but it was generally like it was a functional crew, and that every role that was essential to the production was filled, and we were able to get it done.
Right, that makes sense. Yeah, just sort of keep to the essentials, keep it super light. Yeah, I definitely like this film. I look forward to more projects from you and with you, hopefully.
Yeah,
That being said, what do you have coming up? What are you starting to work on? What is up next for you as far as projects?
I'm really interested in exploring things that I've always been influenced by, and these next projects that I'm working on, it really all starts with that angel project. It's called Hello Angel, that we're working on, and it's about an artist that goes to this playground because he feels like that's where he can really enjoy and pour himself into his imagination away from the dullness and stresses of life. And through pouring himself into this art, the art becomes real. It jumps from the page and it enters his world of existence, and the narrative takes off from there. If I feel like though that it is a parallel to what I'm going through now, and that, and also with the next projects I have coming up, in that I have been inspired by a lot of things, and like when I see something I really like, I think about, how can I make that, like how can I put my own take on it, what attracts me to that idea, that character, and go from there. I'm really attracted to characters in terms of character design, building the world, but also just building the character, the personality, the likes, wants, motivations, dislikes, everything about him. Just building a person, or an entity, or really anything in between from the ground up. And so I'm exploring these ideas and these worlds of like old Hollywood, like the golden age of cinema, exploring this thing like of a surrealistic take, like with the Hello Angel project of an angel coming into the real world. And I'm also exploring things like fashion film. And I love how film intersects with fashion to create visuals that are narrative in themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I, there's a lot of influences that I have for kind of all these projects. For example, when it comes to old Hollywood, I'm a big fan of Nadia Cohen, and she's been in the fashion world. She's also been making music videos. I discovered her from this campaign she did for this brand, I think called D Squared, and it was about a vignette. It was like a vignette series of what it was like to be on a porn set in the valley back during the golden age of that. And it wasn't graphic or anything. It just went into the the characters working on that set, and like what were the personalities like? What was it like being in that world?
Mm.
I started exploring her thing. She's also a photographer. She would take photos, editorials of like Lana Del Rey for Skims. She did that. And she would also, I believe she did the music video for Beyonce's Texas Hold'em. And she just has this eye like that. It's like an old Hollywood esque perspective that I really loved. And on top of that, I was a big fan of Damien Chazelle's Babylon. And so there's that world right there that for me, I've always wanted to explore, and on my own projects. With the fashion film, I was really moved by Margiela's runway show that I did at the beginning of this year in January, and with that runway show they did under that bridge, and I was obsessed with like the lighting and like the costuming they did for that. And I was really, what the thing that I was moved by was the fact that I was moved, that how through fashion they were able to create characters, and even the way the runway models walked, they didn't just simply walk, they almost acted. And um, amongst other things, Marcel Reb, the DP from Euphoria, did a Gucci commercial, and the way he would always shoot those were just really beautiful. Just among, so like the point is like I was inspired by and influenced by a lot, and that hit me in the way of like, well, I've had this world of characters in my head for like years, like not even before these influences came into play, like for at least 5 years or more. I've had this world, and I've been exploring things outside of it. And with this Hello Angel, it really for me is the beginning of fully bringing this world into this one, of these concepts of bringing these characters to have. So I don't want to spoil much, but I've had this world in my head for a while. I've had all these characters, different characters swirling in my mind, and what I would love to start with that really begins to bring this world to fruition through my projects is this concept of guardian angels and how they wash over us, but also interact with us, as will be seen in my upcoming project, Hello Angel. And yeah, so that's kind of the beginning. Um, and I'm excited to see where these projects and how these characters end up coming to fruition.
All right, that concludes today's episode of the show. Bryan is someone I met earlier this year, and we instantly hit it off for two main reasons. Number one, we both kind of wanted to take our work in a similar creative direction, and as a result, I think it allows for some really cool creative chemistry between the two of us. And also, we're both Mexican. I really try to look out for other Mexicans in the film industry, especially just because there's a finite amount of us, and I really when I meet someone who is Mexican doing this, I really cherish that, and I think it's a huge thing. Speaking of creative chemistry, the Hello Angel project that he had kind of alluded to during the episode should be coming out soon. Obviously, you guys will hear about it more when it's public. But I'm excited for it for sure. We're both feeling pretty confident on it, and as far as where the visual language is going, it's something that we both feel really good about. Um, I think it'll be something really interesting for you guys to check out. Um, Thank you for listening. Hopefully you enjoyed. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.